Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. Today we are going to learn 50 important kubectl commands. Guys, you know that kubectl is actually Kubernetes CLI. Just like I told you in the previous chapter that every tool has a CLI, just like we have G Cloud on Google Cloud Platform, AWS CLI on AWS, Azure CLI for Azure. So similarly, we have a Kubernetes CLI which is known as kubectl. Kubectl is used to manage, kubectl commands are actually used to manage the whole cluster. We can run kubectl commands to create services, deployments, pods, RBACs, and so on. So we must know kubectl command as a DevOps engineer, because we have to manage, we have to watch out our Kubernetes clusters. So in the previous video, you saw that I have installed Minikube. Okay, so Minikube is the simplest installation of Kubernetes on your VM, on our virtual machine. In Linux machine, we can install Minikube, and we can practice almost every kubectl Kubernetes CLI commands, kubectl commands. So in today's lecture, we are going to learn kubectl 50 most used kubectl commands. So let's get started and make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. I really appreciate your support. So let's get started with our first kubectl command. So guys, you can see that I have already installed kubectl on my Linux machine, and I have Minikube running on it. I can run Minikube status and it will show us that Minikube is running on this virtual machine. So first of all, our first command would be kubectl. Kubectl, it is also known as kubectl or kubectl. Whatever you like or whatever you are easy with, you can name it. So I used to call as kubectl. So kubectl help. By the way, first, if I run kubectl, it will tell us that we can run these commands, like these are basic commands. For instance, kubectl controls the Kubernetes cluster manager. Just like I told you that it is used to manage and work with Kubernetes cluster. So we must have kubectl installed, and these are actually the commands, like basic commands to create, expose, run, and each command has a simple and basic explanation. For instance, if I talk about kubectl create command, it is used to create a resource from a file or from stdn, standard input. And we have expose, run, and set, and we have basic commands, deploy commands, and cluster management commands. So all these commands have a little bit of explanation and what is the purpose of that command. But for instance, if I want to know more details of any kubectl command, then I can run, I will clear the screen, kubectl help. Okay, and now if I run kubectl help, it is showing the same output. But if I run kubectl help and more, like create, kubectl help and create, now I will get more details of this command. Okay, let me run it. Okay, now you can see that I am getting all the possible options of that kubectl create command. Now that is actually beautiful. You can see that we can create a resource from a file or from standard input. We must have a JSON and YAML formats that are accepted, and you can see the examples. Like, that's how we can use the kubectl create command. That's how this is also another example. And now you can see that we have more details of a command. So similarly guys, if I run, for instance, now you can see that there are more options of that command, that are actually more options, and each option has been explained in our Kubernetes CLI. Now for instance, okay, I will clear it. And now kubectl help and expose. So now I want to know more information, more details of kubectl expose command, and I will enter. And now you can see that there are a lot of options and a basic syntax how you can use this command and what is the purpose of that command. So guys, if you are worried, if you don't understand any command, just run. That is actually our first command, kubectl help. So we can run kubectl help set, we can run kubectl help create, we can run kubectl help and expose, and each command is explained with all the possible information, and you can read out, you can explore more options, and you will have the basic syntax of that command as well. So if you are getting worried about any command, just run kubectl help and that command. So I have presented, I have demonstrated two examples in front of you. Now you must be easy with kubectl help and kubectl all other commands. And for instance, if I run, if I want to know more about the expose command, you can see it explains that expose a resource as a new Kubernetes service. We are going to use this command to expose a service like cluster IP, node port, load balancer, external name. These are the services in Kubernetes, and more information has been shared, and that's how help command has got our back, and we can have every information, every option of any kubectl command. So guys, now the second command is kubectl cluster info. Now this command actually shows an overview of our cluster. So you can see that our kubectl control plane is running on this URL, and we have core DNS, and our core DNS is running at this URL. So we have the basic, a very general overview, a very general information of our cluster. Now moving to the next command, kubectl cluster info. Now I want to know every detail of the cluster first, and this command is, by the way, used for troubleshooting purposes. Cluster info and dump. Now I will run it, and you will be bombarded with the huge and long output. Now you can see this is showing a lot of logs and huge information about our cluster. So I will stop it, and for instance, if there are any issues with our cluster, we can use this command, which is kubectl cluster info and dump. So it will share all the possible logs and details of cluster, and this command is really helpful for the troubleshooting of our production Kubernetes cluster. Alright guys, now moving to the next command, kubectl get nodes. For instance, if I want to know the information about our nodes, master nodes, okay, so I will run this command, and it is showing only one node, which is our minikube, and it is being worked as the control plane. At the same time, it is our control plane, so that's why it is showing only one node. So if I want to know more information about our nodes, master node or worker nodes, I can run kubectl get nodes command. Okay. Similarly, I can run kubectl get services, get pods, get namespaces, get deployments, but I am going to share these commands one by one gradually. So guys, if I want to know the information about a specific node, for instance, there are multiple nodes in my Kubernetes cluster. Let's assume there are tens of worker nodes and master nodes in my Kubernetes cluster, and I want to know the information about a specific one node, then I can use this command kubectl get describe node and the node name. But for my current scenario, I have only one node and this is minikube, so I will run this command as, and I will paste the node name as minikube. But it works like a charm. You just have to replace the name with your node name. Okay, I have this node and I want to know more details of my, this is my master node, right? So I want to know the details of this node, so I will use kubectl describe node and the node name. Okay, so that's how it works, and you can see that I have got all the details of this node, addresses, capacity, and CPU, system information, machine ID, etc, etc. Okay, I will clear the screen. After that, guys, I can run a simple command to know the version of my kubectl Kubernetes CLI, and the command is simple: kubectl and version. Now you can see I have this client version, customized version, and server version of my current Kubernetes CLI. And now if I want to know the overview of all the resources in my Kubernetes cluster, I can run kubectl get all. Okay, and now you can see I have this pod, I have these services, this deployment, and ReplicaSet. So that is actually an overview of all the resources in my Kubernetes cluster. So we can run kubectl get all command to know the information about the resources of our Kubernetes cluster. And after that, I will run kubectl options command. Kubectl options, and it will share all the possible options of our Kubernetes CLI. The following options can be passed to any command. To any kubectl command, we can pass all these options. So if you want to go more deeper and you want to have a deep insight of any kubectl command and its options, you can use this kubectl option command, and it will share all the possible options that can be used in any kubectl command. So there are a lot of options, and I can see like -s for server, TLS server name, token, and so on. And after that, I will run kubectl API resources, and it will print out all the supported API resources in our Kubernetes cluster. Now you can see we have these supported API versions and resources that are supported by our Kubernetes cluster. So this is actually important when we are going to upgrade our Kubernetes cluster, when we are going to change some versions. So we must know what are the supported versions in our Kubernetes cluster, what are the supported resources, API resources. And similarly, the other command is kubectl API versions, and these commands versions, and these commands are used to get the details about the supported resources and the supported versions. Now you can see these are actually the supported versions in our Kubernetes cluster. So these commands are actually required when we are going to change the version, when we are going to update the version, and these can be critical when we have a Kubernetes cluster in production. You know that changing version or updating any version can be challenging task, can be a huge challenge. So we must know what kind of resources, what kind of API versions are supported, so we can run kube control API resources or API versions, and it will share all the supported API resources and versions in our Kubernetes cluster. Alright guys, now an easy command and most frequently used command is kubectl get namespaces. So what are the namespaces that our Kubernetes cluster? There can be more namespaces, but these are actually the current namespaces in my Kubernetes cluster. So I can run kubectl get namespaces to get the list of the namespaces. And now if I want to create a new namespace, kubectl create namespace and the name of the namespace, like for instance DevOps Molvi. So it will create a separate room for me, an isolated space for me. And now I run kubectl get namespaces, and I must have the DevOps Molvi namespace that has been created 13 seconds ago. So that's how we can create namespaces using the kubectl create namespace command. And by the way guys, default namespace is set as the default. Okay, for instance, if I run kubectl get pods, so you can see there is one pod running in my default namespace. So similarly, if I want to know the resources of any other namespace, I have to use the namespace as -n and the name of the namespace. Now there are no resources found in the DevOps Molvi namespace, or I can use -n default and it will show the resources in that namespace. So that's how we can use the -n switch and the namespace name. So by default, the namespace that is set is actually default namespace. Okay, if I run kubectl get namespaces and I have this namespace, you can see this default namespace is everywhere and it is set as default. Now there must be a question in your mind that if I want to set DevOps Molvi as the namespace, as my default namespace, can I do that? Yes, it is possible, and the command for that is kubectl config set -context --. Don't worry guys, I have created the document on my GitHub repository and I will share all these commands that I have practiced in this practical session. So current namespace is equal to DevOps Molvi. Now you can see that context minikube modified. Okay, so I can set DevOps Molvi or any namespace as my default namespace running this command kubectl config set context current and the namespace name, which is DevOps Molvi. Now if I run kubectl get pods command, okay, it will by default tell me that there are no resources in DevOps Molvi namespace. Now for instance, if I change the namespace as default as kube system, okay, you must practice these commands again and again. And now if I run kubectl get pods, and now I must see all the pods of this kube system namespace. Okay, now you can see the difference. Okay, so there were no pods in DevOps Molvi, and now I have set kube system as my default namespace. And now again, if I want to change to DevOps Molvi, I will just run this command kubectl config set context current and namespace is equal to DevOps Molvi. Now there must be no resources kubectl get services, and there are no resources get deployment, because this is actually a brand new namespace. So there are no resources and we are going to create our resources in our DevOps Molvi namespace. So for instance, if I create another namespace, kubectl create namespace my test namespace. Now kubectl get namespaces, and you can see this is my test namespace, okay, and it is active for the last 6 seconds. So I can now, I want to delete this namespace. It was created by accident, okay, and I want to delete it. Then the command would be kubectl delete namespace and the name of the namespace my test ns. Alright guys, now you can see that my test ns namespace has been deleted. So if you want to delete the namespace, you can run kubectl delete namespace and the name of your namespace. And by the way, it is a dangerous command because the resources in that namespace will also be deleted. Okay guys, now if I want to see the pods in any namespace, kubectl get pods -n and cube system. Okay, now it will show me the pods that are running in this namespace. If I want to see the pods in my default namespace, then kubectl get pods minus or -default. So you have to run and hyphen -n and default, my bad. And you can see that there is one image, one pod in that is running in our default namespace. And if I want to see all the pods in every namespace, then I have to run kubectl get pods -all namespaces. And now you can see that I have pods in all the namespaces. So this is the command kubectl get pods -all namespaces. I am going to use extensively this switch to get the resources, to get the information about the resources, services, deployments, pods, okay, in every namespace. Then I can run kubectl get deployment get services -all namespaces. So every pod in each namespace, if it is running in any namespace, would be shown here. Now I can see the pod of default namespace, kube system namespace, and Kubernetes dashboard namespace. So that's how we can run this command. Now if I want to know more details of all these pods in all namespaces, there is a beautiful command and I personally love it. Kubectl get pods -o wide and all namespaces. Now you can see that I'm getting more information about my pods, the node it is running, each pod, the name of the node where it is running, and the IP address, age, restarts, and the status, and if it is ready or not. So you can use this -o wide switch to get more details of one pod or all the pods in all namespaces. So guys, if I'm troubleshooting any issues with any pod and I want to get more details about a specific pod, then what kind of commands I have to use? So first of all, I am using this command to get all the pods in all namespaces. Kubectl get pods -all namespaces. Okay, or I can also use kubectl get pods A. I will get the same output. See, so if you want to avoid writing this all namespaces again and again, you can simply use A with caps lock. Okay, so kubectl get pods -a. Now for instance, if I want to know the details of my Kube API server and it is in the namespace kube system, So I can use kubectl describe pod, the name of the pod, and the name of the namespace. Okay, -n cube system. So now you can see it has shared all the details of that specific pod. Now I am digging into any issue. So I'm getting all the possible details of each pod. So I can use this command, and describe will describe the details. It will list down all the details of a specific pod and the date of creation, what this pod is being used for, the IP address of the pod, and also the containers that are running in this pod. So kubectl describe pod, the name of the pod, and the name of the namespace. Again, kubectl describe pod, name of the pod, and the name of the namespace. For instance, if I want to run this command again, kubectl get pods capital A, and I want to get the details of this pod, kubectl describe pod, the name of the pod, and the name of the namespace. Its namespace is default. Okay, now you can see that I have got the information, the details of this pod, and the time, start time, labels, annotations, status, IP address, and so on. So these are actually really important commands used for troubleshooting. Similarly, from troubleshooting, I want to share more details about the logs of any pod. kubectl log and the name of the pod. Now if I want to see the logs of any pod, then I can run kubectl logs and the name of the pod and the name of the namespace. So this is actually the logs. It is facing any issue. Similarly, I can run kubectl logs of Kube API server. This is the pod and namespace as Kube system. Now you can see I'm getting the logs of that specific pod. So if I want to see the stream or live logs, then I can use kubectl get logs -f. This is just like tail -f or logs -f, and the name of the pod and the name of the namespace, Kube system, and I will get the stream logs, or you can say the live logs. So guys, 20 commands have been completed. Okay guys, now if I want to access any pod using SSH, for instance, if I want to enter into any pod, what would be the command? So first of all, I will run kubectl get pods, and you can see this is running as DevOps web. So for instance, if I want to SSH this pod, then I will use kubectl exec -it. This is just like we used to access Docker containers. Okay, if you remember, and the name of the pod and the command with space. Okay, --, and bin bash. Now I am in this in the pods environment. In the pod, just like we used to access any Linux server using SSH, we can access any pod using kubectl execute -it, name of the pod, and the command. Similarly, we can execute other commands as well. So now you can see this is my pod. I am inside the pod. So we can access the pods using this command. Now I will exit. Okay guys, if I want to run a new pod, for instance, a new pod can be run using kubectl run name of the pod. This is my pod 2 and the image that I want to use to run this pod. So hyphen image is equal to alpine latest. So it will create a new pod. Now if I want to see that if that pod has been created, kubectl get pods. So you can see it has crash loop back off. This is the status of the pod, but that's how we can run new pods. For instance, if I want to run kubectl run pod 3 and image is equal to nginx latest, let's see what it does. Sorry, pod 3. Pod 2 already exists and pod 3 has been created. So kubectl get pods, and you can see our pod 2 has also been completed and it will be running in a while, and our pod 3 is already running. Now I can use docker exec just like we use docker exec. I can use kubectl exec to enter or to access this pod. So that's how guys we can run new pods. We can create new pods in any given namespace. Now for instance, if I don't want to have this pod and I want to delete it, the command is simple: kubectl delete the name of the pod and the name of the pod, and it will delete the pod. Kubectl get pods and pod 2 should be deleted. Okay, and now I have only 2 pods. So these are actually the related commands to create pods, to run new pods with different images, to see the pods, or to access the pods using the kubectl execute commands. So these commands are were related with pods, and these are extensively used by the DevOps engineers who are managing Kubernetes clusters because they have to troubleshoot any issues with the pods. So we have covered almost all the basic commands that are relevant to pods, like kubectl logs of the pod or stream logs of any pods, how we can delete any pod, how we can create new pods, etc. So I hope that these commands are simple for you, but you have to practice all these commands again and again to get your hands on these commands. Alright guys, now after that, if I want to see the deployments, kubectl get deployment. You can see I have already one deployment that has been created. And guys, if you are confused, if you want to know about all these terminologies, you can watch my previous lecture about Kubernetes terminology, and I have explained each thing like pod, config map, deployment, service, etc. So since I'm focused on running commands in this lecture, so if you have any confusion about any terminology, you can watch out that lecture. So this is used to get the deployments, kubectl get deployment. And similarly, we can create a new deployment with the help of kubectl create deployment. The name of the deployment, like for instance DevOps Molvi, and the image is equal to nginx and latest. You can see a new deployment DevOps Molvi has been created. Kubectl get deployment. Now you can see both deployments are ready and available. So that's how we can create a new deployment. Kubectl create deployment and the name of the deployment and the image that you want to use to create that deployment. Similarly, if I want to see all the deployments of all namespaces, then I can run kubectl get deployments hyphen hyphen all namespaces, and it will list down all the deployments of our Kubernetes cluster. Now I can see two deployments in the default namespace, and there is only one deployment core DNS in the kube system namespace. So that's how we can use kubectl get deployments command to get to see the list of all the deployments. And now guys, for instance, if I don't want to have the DevOps Molvi deployment, I can simply run kubectl delete deployment and the deployment name, and it will delete the whole deployment. Now again, if I run kubectl get deployments, our DevOps Molvi deployment has been deleted. So these commands are actually related with the deployments. After that guys, let's discuss a few commands related to services. Kubectl get services hyphen hyphen all namespaces. Now you can see there are actually two types of services that has already been created. I have created this one for just for testing, and it is a load balancer type and it is cluster IP. A service is actually created so that the external users can interact with applications. We can use services to expose our applications for the external users, like node port, and we can also use services to expose our applications internally within the Kubernetes cluster as well. So that is actually the purpose of services. And just I told you that there are four types of services. We can get all the services details with the help of kubectl get services, and using all namespaces, it has shown me all the current services of that Kubernetes cluster. For instance, if I want to remove this service, okay, kubectl delete service and the name of the service DevOps web. So it has been deleted. Now I want to recreate it. Then how can I create a new service? Kubectl create load balancer. This is actually the type of the service. Load balancer, sorry, what is the spelling? Load balancer, name of the service DevOps Molvi service, and the ports TCP is equal to 80 80 80. Now this is actually the external port and that would be the internal port. This would be for the external users, and that is actually the port inside the container. So it will create, okay, and kubectl create load, sorry, I have to use service. Okay, now it has been created. So this is actually the full syntax. Kubectl create service. The type of the service can be cluster IP, node port, external name, and the name of the service DevOps Molvi service for this video, and the ports, the external port and the internal port of the container. So now kubectl get services, I should be able to see the DevOps Molvi service and its type and the cluster IP, and this is actually the port where it is running. And if I want to delete this service, then the command would be simple: kubectl delete service and the name of the service, and it will delete it. So these are actually the service related commands. That's how we can create new services and delete or that's how we can also change the ports of any service. Alright guys, now after that we are going to discuss some config maps command. Config map in Kubernetes is used to create non-sensitive data. That data is not important from security point of view, so we can create config maps. So I will run kubectl get config maps hyphen hyphen all namespaces. Now you can see this is the output. We have the data for against each namespace and what is that. For instance, these are some certificates and this is also the certificate and other data. So that's how we can get all the config maps in Kubernetes cluster using kubectl get config maps. And for instance, if I want to get the config maps of a specific namespace, then kubectl get config maps hyphen n default. So there is only one config map, and if I want to change it to kube system, now you can see there are other, and also it is showing the number of data that config map contains. So this, now if I want to use the describe command, kubectl describe and the name of the config map and its name, sorry, kubectl and hyphen n kube system. The server does not have a resource type, and this I will use config map. Okay, now it works. So that's how guys, if some command is not working for you, you have to check where are you creating a mistake. So I was also creating some mistakes. So that's how we can see the data of any config map, what's the data inside any config map. So I have described the whole data of this config map using the kubectl describe config map command, and it is in the kube system namespace. If you are not getting any data, make sure that you check out the namespace and you check out the command or any typo or mistake, etc. So that's how we can see. Now this is actually the certificates and keys. So we can use config maps to store that kind of data. For secrets or passwords or tokens in Kubernetes, we use the secrets. And for non-sensitive data in Kubernetes, we use config maps. I hope that you understand the difference as well. Config maps are used for non-sensitive data and secrets are used for highly sensitive data like passwords, keys, SSH or tokens, beer tokens, etc. And by the way guys, similarly we can use the kubectl get config maps, and if I want to remove it, I can use the kubectl delete config map. Okay, kubectl delete config map and the name of the config map, but I need it, so I'm not deleting it, but the command, it should work for you. Kubectl delete config map and the name of the config map, it will delete the config map. Alright guys, after config maps, for sensitive data we can use the secrets. Okay, kubectl get secrets hyphen hyphen all namespaces. Now there are actually no resources in any namespace on this Kubernetes cluster. This is just for testing purposes, but you can run this command to get the secrets of any Kubernetes cluster. And by the way, in order to create a new secret, I will just copy this command. This is a lengthy command actually, but it is really simple to understand. So I will just copy it. You can also see that I have all these commands pasted here, and each command has been described, explained in simple words so that you can quickly understand. So in order to create a new secret, for instance, I am creating a new secret. I will just copy this command and run it. So kubectl create the secret, okay, and the name of the secret and the type generic, and this is actually syntax. Now I'm using username as admin and the password is admin123. So this is just a test secret, and you can see that I have created this secret. So if I run kubectl describe my secret, in the default namespace, secret, my secret, and now you can see I have this. It has been created in the default namespace, and the data has been also encrypted using this type. So the password is and the username is 5 bytes and 8 bytes. So that's how we can describe the secret. And if I want to delete it, I don't need it. So I can run kubectl delete secret and my secret. So that's how we can create new secrets, and that's how we can delete or work with secrets on Kubernetes. Alright guys, we have covered almost 43 commands. I have numbered all these commands here as well. So I have executed each and every command according to that page, according to that list. Now I have only, so we are left with around 6 or 7 commands. So the next command is actually related to see the replica sets on our Kubernetes cluster. Replica set is actually the identical number of pods on a worker node. That is actually a replica set. Kubectl get replica set hyphen all namespaces. So we have these replica sets, and if I want to check the daemon sets, a daemon set ensures that at least one pod should run on each worker node, but it is for actually a large Kubernetes cluster. So we can see a daemon set here as well. You can see we have this kubeproxy. So it means that kubeproxy should run on each worker node. So these commands, and also kubectl get stateful set. Stateful sets are more organized pod with backend store or with storage with etcd. So stateful sets hyphen all namespaces, and there should not be any stateful set, but this command is used to get the list of all stateful sets on that Kubernetes cluster. So we can run Kubernetes kubectl get replica sets or daemon sets or stateful sets to get their details accordingly. And by the way guys, if you want to monitor the pods and nodes in your production cluster, I will just share the commands because I don't have any data on this testing Kubernetes cluster. This is just a mini kube. There is no load, there is no traffic, but the commands are really simple, and you can run kubectl top nodes, or you can see that there is no matrix, there are no data that is available for me, or I can also run kubectl top pods, and there is no data available. just like we use top on any Linux server, we can use, the idea is the same. We can use kubectl top pods, or we can use kubectl top nodes, and it shares the live coverage, live load average, resource consumption, memory consumptions of nodes if we run kubectl top nodes. And if we want to monitor or watch out our resource consumptions regarding pods, we can run kubectl top pods. So guys, this would be our second last command. And if I want to watch all the pods, I mean their live status, then I can run kubectl get pods hyphen hyphen watch all name spaces. Now you can see, this is actually the live status of the pods. I'm now monitoring the status of my pods, so this is just like a live stream. So that's how we can see the status of all the pods. And the last command, which is a dangerous command, but let's try it out. Kubectl delete hyphen hyphen all hyphen hyphen all namespaces, and it has deleted everything. Now you can see this pod has been deleted, pod 3 has been deleted, all the other pods have been deleted. So if I run kubectl get deployment, there is no deployment. If I run kubectl get pods hyphen a, and now these pods have been created again. You can see their age is 33 second, 32 second. So after their, right after their deletion, because these are the core components of our Minikube clusters, so these have been created. Now the other data, other parts that we had on our Kubernetes cluster has been deleted. So there should not be any, now you can see there should not be any deployment, just like we have created DevOps web, and there is no service like we had in kubedns Kubernetes, and all these parts were deleted. So that's why I have pasted this command at the end of today's lecture, because it is really dangerous. Make sure that you never execute such commands in, even in dev or staging or QA environments. And I'm not talking about the production. It should be a disaster, and it can cost you job. So this is actually a dangerous command, but you can run it on your Minikube Kubernetes cluster, just like I did in front of you, and it will delete all the resources on one go. So guys, that was our lecture on 50 kubectl commands that are mostly used by DevOps engineers to manage their Kubernetes cluster. Now you must have Minikube on your VM, and you run these commands again and again and again, so that you get a good practice of all these commands, and you understand how resources can be created in any Kubernetes cluster. Guys, honestly, these commands uh, are used to manage the production Kubernetes clusters. So if you have a good practice on this Minikube cluster, I hope that you will have a great confidence to execute these commands on production environments. And in the upcoming lectures, I will be sharing more Kubernetes command kubectl Kubernetes CLI commands with you guys. Make sure that you subscribe DevOps Molvi. I will watch you in the next lecture. Have a good one, and bye.